Nearly 12 years ago, while living in Israel for the year, my wife and I had the opportunity to spend an afternoon at Dialogue in the Dark, often referred to as the Blind Museum in Cholon. For those of you who have visited Dialogue in the Dark, you'll undoubtedly relate to what I'm about to tell you. And if you have not yet had the opportunity to do so, if you should find yourself in Israel at some point, make it a point to visiting it. The exhibit is meant to simulate being blind. During the tour, which takes place in such absolute darkness that you can feel it in the air, similar to the way that many of the Torah commentators describe the plague of Choshech, you are led through various spaces that a blind person may have to navigate during everyday life. A noisy pedestrian crossing, a market, a pub, and boarding a boat at a port. What was most shocking to us on our visit was at the end, when we returned to the light. Back then, I think this used to be a secret, but it was when we saw our guide for the first time and realized that he was blind. Ironically and sadly, our guide had actually trained the blind and vision impaired to use computers before going blind himself from a degenerative condition. According to the museum, one of the objectives of the exhibit is that, quote, walking in the dark simulates for visitors the world as a blind person experiences it, and thus enables open, intimate, unbiased dialogue between blind and sighted people. A role reversal is created in the exhibit where the impaired person becomes the leader, and thus shows the group that his or her world is not poorer, but merely different. That afternoon opened my eyes to the needs of the blind and the disadvantages their impairment places them at. We would all agree that everyone should be able to cross the street safely. But what's done to make sure that those who can't look both ways before crossing can get around? There are different things that are done in cities throughout the world. Just two examples. Training seeing eye dogs and providing them to the blind. Installing bells that ring when the light turns green for pedestrians. And those things are examples of Tzedek, ensuring equal opportunity for everyone. I want to share with you another time when my eyes were opened to what I did not see right in front of me. For 6 years, I was the assistant rabbi at a typical modern Orthodox religious Zionist shul in Chicago. After I'd been there for a few years, the rabbi asked me if I wanted to help him on Purim. When he asked, I didn't really know what he had in mind. I thought it might be going to deliver mishloach manot to some of the shul's more generous donors. But it was quite the opposite. After davening on Purim morning, we went into the office we shared, and he placed nearly $10,000 in $20 bills on the desk. He then pulled out a list and several envelopes. Unbeknownst to me, within the community, there was what can best be described as a secret society of givers. A modern-day version of the Kuppah described by the Gemara and the Rambam, which looked out for those in the community who were struggling, but would not necessarily go to the local tzedakah and chesed organizations for assistance. We split up the list and began stuffing envelopes with a different amount of money for each family, an amount that the rabbi had predetermined based on everyone's needs. As I began to look at the names, I recognized all of them, and they all equally shocked me. There was the guy who attended my shiur every Sunday morning, who I often admittedly avoided at Kiddush on Shabbat because a conversation with him lasted a minimum of 25 minutes. I didn't know he needed money, I said, to which the rabbi responded, his wife is a preschool teacher whose hours are 9 to 12 and they barely pay. He's a social worker at a nursing home and also makes a minimal amount of money. He's had a lot of health problems, and whatever money they do have, he uses to pay tuition for his son. A few names later, I said, I thought this guy had a pretty high up position at a produce distributor. To which the rabbi responded, he was laid off 3 months ago and hasn't been able to find a job. He's 50. He's only worked at one place his entire life, and employers only want younger people for the jobs he's qualified for. His wife charges $10 an hour for a daycare she runs out of her house that has 3 kids in it. They have 3 daughters in school and a mortgage on their house. This continued over and over again, and I found myself getting to know the people I thought I knew. Then came the most fulfilling and exhilarating part, distributing the money. We were committed to anonymity for the sake of the recipient. For some, it was easy. Drop it in the mailbox. But for others, it proved much more difficult. One person who lived in an apartment building, I couldn't ring the bell to their apartment in order to get into the building, because then I wouldn't be able to sneak the envelope under their door when they answered it. So I rang the bell of one of their neighbors and claimed I was UPS, hoping they'd buzz me into the building. When the person responded, "Packages are usually left between the doors with the super," I said, "It's a special delivery and requires your signature." I was buzzed in. Thank God they didn't realize it was Sunday and UPS doesn't deliver. I quickly ran to the apartment I was supposed to go to, pushed the envelope under the door, and bolted as fast as I could. As I headed for the stairs, I heard the man's voice say, "Honey, what's this?" and then opened the door. I was long gone and lucky that I hadn't broken an ankle after jumping down what must have been at least 50 stairs. While in Cholon, my eyes were open to the blind. In Chicago, my eyes were open to what was right in front of me. And this is why Tzedek is so important. It's not enough for us to give our pocket change when someone walks around with the tzedakah box during tefillah. That is tzedakah, and it's a mitzvah. But Tzedek demands of us to create systems, structures, and institutions as a community and society to make sure that everyone has a chance. This is what I want you to think about today. Do you see what's in front of your very eyes? Look up at the screen. This is a very famous image. What do you see? If you're like most people, you see the goblet, and you don't see what's also right in front of you. Two faces looking at each other. Or what about this image? You probably see the young woman in the fur coat. This is what we do. We see those who are just like us, while passing by the old lady who looks like she may need our help. Tzedek is coming together as a community to collectively go beyond ourselves. What are we doing as a community to help the disadvantaged? What should we be doing? How do we do this? How do we bring about change? This is important. It's a big deal, and that's why we're dedicating this year's programming to Tzedek. Some of us may feel strongly about certain ways to bring about change, while others will disagree and think that another way is better. That's great, and we encourage thoughtful, respectful, civil debate. During the yahrtzeit Yemei Teshuvah, this time of intense introspection and reflection, let's start thinking of how we as a community can go beyond ourselves and make our school, community, society, country, and world an even better place filled with tzedek. Thank you.